Are we live?
We are live.
Good morning. This is Kent Dahlgren. I'm the Chief Technology Officer with Bitnation. I'm just going to give a preview of our roadmap, the work that we've done and the work that is currently being done, and then what you can expect from us in the near future. We, for those who are relatively new to Bitnation, we received the UNESCO NetExplo Grand Prix Award in 2017. That's for the work of stateless people. Previous winners include Twitter, Shazam, Slack, Spotify, Siri. It's again recognition for the work that we had already done in helping stateless people. We've been featured in many publications, and you can find out a lot about us online if you're interested in learning more about Bitnation. So getting right into the target that we have, this is a longer term target, and this actually gives some insights on our architectural constraints. Is that what we're providing is a decentralized governance solution, and the word governance can be a little bit daunting for people, but it's really how people organize their lives. It's how they organize their economic affairs, and we have a ambassador in Africa named Stephen Sunday, and I really like the way he puts it, is that you create your world your way. And so when you look at the infrastructure, the baseline infrastructure of these environments, it's a mobile platform is ubiquitous. So we've got Android would probably be the priority, although we do also support iOS. But in these environments, Android is ubiquitous. There's billions of cell phone users. The majority of them are in developing world. So Brazil, Argentina, Mexico, Turkey, India, Pakistan, and again, the reason I want to go through this is to illustrate that what we are developing is the emphasis is on decentralized. It's the traditional internet approach is not one. It's one that's built upon client server. In this particular case, it's there's really no such thing as a server. It's everybody is participating at a peer-to-peer level. So as you can see in the lower right-hand corner, the vital requirements we have is privacy, anonymity, and security. For these people to be able to declare agency on their terms, they need to be able to do so without hindrance from really anybody. So we have no biometric data on chain. At the same time, the system has to be available, it needs to be reliable, it needs to be economical. So those are the constraints that we're working within. And I think we've done a pretty good job of that, and you'll see that here in a moment. The shorter term target are what you might consider the early adopters. And as it turns out, a lot of our team is made up like this. A lot of the engineers themselves live in a lot of different countries. They receive payment in crypto. They often see themselves as members of a global citizenry. So this is really where our target is right now, is those who are already seizing agency, utilizing the tools that are before them. So there are two different user modes for the application, and for most everybody is already familiar with how to work within a smartphone environment, and there's this idea of a store. The mobile device itself is in effect a vending machine for different applications. And so we do have that model, except that in the context of decentralized, there's not really a centralized store per se. Is that there's a way for the providers to provide solutions to their customers, if you will, or as we call them, citizens. So there's, generally speaking, two different categories of users. The first one would be the governance providers, which could be, as illustrated in the image, it could be a group of people in India or Pakistan, who are utilizing their own social connections to create an economic and governance framework for others. So they are, again, self-organizing and providing their own solutions. So I like the model of an economic zone, is that they could be facilitating an economic exchange between different people, and then there's of course built-in governance. Who is responsible for what, and how do we manage our own affairs and that sort of thing. So this usage mode, this governance provider, one of those modes is they're doing the care and feeding of the what we call a nation, and they really are setting up their own governance. And then the second category are the users, are the ones who are actually just utilizing that system. So a really good example would be people who are utilizing our platform to exchange in goods and services economically within the defined economic zone of a local community. Just to use an example, one constraint that we have is that the governance users can seamlessly become a provider if they want. If they are dissatisfied with the services of the nation, they can say, well, you know what, I'll just create my own. So here's a good example of what this looks like in the interface. In fact, this is a screenshot from the existing application on Android, is that when you create the governance model, somebody will create what we call a nation, and then they'll choose, you can see on top, they've chosen their different legal system, how they are doing, enforcement. In this case, the reputation services would be, you accrue a reputation, and that's how you enforce conformance to the rules. It utilizes a holacracy, but there's a lot of other options that are in there. People can define as they want. But as you can see with the yellow text, there are different categories that are built in, and this will continue to expand. So as this platform evolves, the nation's provider would be able to list, say, different legal services providers that their citizens could choose from, or insurance services, or social services. And so this would be an example of what the app store would look like from the perspective of the nation user. So that's just a quick introduction. Let me talk a little bit about our development process. And what you see is the first quarter of this year, but this is essentially the same way that we work throughout the year, is that we have 3-week sprints. And this, for those of you who are familiar with the engineering methodology of Scrum Agile, that's literally what this is. We run 3-week sprints, so each development cycle is that duration, resulting in a release. So in general, there are 4 sprints per quarter, and philosophically, this ends up helping. A lot of engineers will want to keep working on something until it's perfect, which is in fact not possible, right? So, and there's a lot of constraints that go into it. When you write programs, you don't really know what you're going to get until you get into it. So you could say, how long do you think it'll take to do something, and you don't really know until you start working on it. So there's got to be a constraint that says, you know what, we're going to release in every 3 weeks, right? That's what we do. So in this case, we just release, and we just continue pushing updates. And as a consequence, we have a pretty steady and solid what's called a velocity. So, so in the second quarter, which is really now, and it's almost concluded, our big story is introducing what we call a DApp in the context of decentralized platform. A DApp is basically an application, but it runs in a decentralized manner. And it's the first time that citizens will be able to utilize our platform to engage in economic exchange and the governance model. what you will be seeing in just a few weeks, actually, just 2 to 3 weeks, will be the first tools that a third-party developer could leverage to create their own solutions on our platform. So, a really simple example would be facilitating an auction exchange between citizens, or arbitration, or that sort of thing. As I can actually give a specific example that one of our early adopters are pursuing, which would be to define a request for qualifications and then advertise that request for qualifications as an auction. And in this context, that would enable a governance provider to seek and secure the lowest qualified bidder for a certain bit of work. The entity that wins the contract wins the auction, right? So those become the terms of the contract. This is utilizing a blockchain architecture, as is the case with most decentralized architectures. So, the existing economic and governance model is one that relies upon a closed and proprietary ledger, which really lends itself to inefficiency and fraud and corruption. In this case, we're utilizing an open blockchain architecture, which is immutable and open to auditing. So a governance provider might find it necessary to seek out the lowest qualified bid to provide municipal services for their citizens. In this case, they can get the lowest qualified bid. The terms of the bid become the terms of the contract, and then that could be covered with different payment options, subscription or payment plan. The payments are made in crypto and held in escrow and released to the different parties when the terms are satisfied. This is the really cool thing about what they call smart contracts. It's a little bit hard to trick the contract. When the terms are met, the money is released. That's all there is to it. So the second quarter ends with, and I'll get into this in a little bit more detail, but we make it really easy to create these dApps. So we have an engine, a specification to help developers, and just a few examples of what that would look like. So these are our release dates for this quarter. As you can see, the quarter is almost concluded. In fact, we are on the cusp of releasing the 8th of June release, the 0.4.5, and then we conclude the quarter on the 29th of June. So to go through the various sprints of what we've done, we finished the first quarter by introducing the first governance framework and a basic chat capability in a decentralized form. And then we felt it necessary to refactor some of the architecture based on what we learned. The thing I should disclose about Bitnation is that we publish everything we do in open source, and we use as many open source components as possible. And there's a lot of reasons for that. I'd spent a lot of years in proprietary closed environments, actually literally come from the security industry. And a lot of that software is what I would charitably describe as ubiquitous spyware. We don't do that at all. So you can examine our source code. In fact, we will show you how to decompile the application so you can ensure that there's no spyware in there. So, the byproduct of that is that we're relying almost entirely upon open source frameworks, and then we entirely publish upon using open source. So what we learned in the first quarter, and I continue to learn, is that a lot of the decentralized protocols are really being taxed by the architectural constraints we have. So, for example, we use a lot of the libp2p framework, which I would invite you to look up. It's actually a fantastic protocol. It uses the application layer as a transport layer. The challenge is, of course, we end up having to really evolve the code for the use cases that we have, again, for availability, reliability, performance, etc. So we found it necessary to refactor the mobile application based on what we had learned so far. So we added the ability of having multiple accounts per device. Again, if you're in rural environments or if you're in environments like a refugee camp or where there's substandard architecture, the computer is the mobile device, and it makes sense that you would have multiple accounts per device. Also facilitating backup, that sort of thing. We have done research around which nation's framework to use. Do we write our own, or do we use one that has already been created? And so we decided to go with the Ergon framework, which we will begin implementing in the third quarter. So we're planning that now. And then at the end of the first sprint, we finalized the DApp specification, which is published on GitHub. So we have been working with early adopter communities. There's a town in Brazil that is technically larger than the Vatican, and they are utilizing our services or looking to adopt them increasingly. So, that is helping validate the requirements. There's a homeless entity that set up in South Carolina, and they are explicitly non-charity. They really want to build on their own merits. The community that does buy-sell trade online, and the digital nomads. So those are some examples of who has been working with us to make sure that our requirements are meeting their needs. And then the specification includes how we do it, which is the example code. The second quarter, or second sprint of the quarter, we finished up the chat refactoring. We continue working on the UI, had done some more work on the transaction queue. We added expat, it's our token, to the wallet, and made UI updates. So, excuse me, what is in progress right now and should be done by now is the release, the 0.4.5 release. So this will be available in the Google Play Store, and we'll have it available for Apple iOS. So again, we are continuing to work on the chat. Again, the primary interface that people will be utilizing will look a lot like a chat interface, although it would be multi-user chat. You could consider those almost a forum type environment, but you could easily branch into a secure, 2 or more person chat exchange. An example of this is within the environment on the mobile platform. You could be chatting with somebody, another citizen, and then come to an agreement to do an economic exchange. So it would branch into a separate private conversation that looks like a chat environment. Come to a agreement about how you're going to buy or sell or whatever else using one of the dApps, and then conduct your business in that manner. So that's a lot of the back end. I hate to say back end because there's really no such thing as back end architecture in the context of decentralized. So we're still working on that. We've done a lot of that stuff. A lot of the crypto work, the networking is done. We're still working on the UI stuff. Again, we added the expat to the wallet that we have. The existing wallet also supports Ether, and we'll continue to add other tokens. And so yes, the dApp engine and the first dApps, we're continuing to work on that. The nation's capability is available. It had been available, but because of the refactoring, we needed to make some modifications. So that again will be available pretty soon. And then what we are planning actually later today, and then we begin work on Monday, is the final sprint of this quarter, which is the dApp engine, the documentation, the example dApps. In addition, we are beginning the definition of the Cortex, which we will begin introducing in the third quarter. So Exocortex would be an environment within which our AI would exist. And our AI is named Lucy. It's a reputation AI, which would be evaluating the performance and the fitness of transactions and contracts and citizens and nations, and then applying a reputation. But it's a multidimensional evaluation. And in fact, it's not a monolithic AI. It's a multitude of AIs that are working within the context of a shared memory bank, which is an exocortex. So that's what you'll begin seeing in the third quarter. So that concludes the presentation. I wanted to see if there were any questions. So one of the questions that came up, can you invite actual real nation governments to use the platform for voting blockchain implementation? The answer is wholeheartedly yes. In fact, that has been, we've had a lot of those conversations because it is actually a seamless use of the existing platform. One thing I should point out is that when we say governance, people will frequently think of it in the context of government as they know it. But in fact, it's not limited to that use at all. In fact, governance applies to how a business is run or an operation. My wife's a small business owner, but what allows that business to run is governance, right? So that's built into the platform, and it ends up being really the same between a municipal government or a business. It's really exactly the same. So I can give some examples of some fairly interesting conversations I've had with real nation governments. You know, at a municipal level, their needs are actually fairly discrete. Like, you know, how could we replicate our existing bureaucratic municipal model by essentially migrating it to the open, transparent, and immutable platform of a blockchain, which is actually what we would facilitate. So, you know, let's say that there's a municipality that's providing water services to their citizens. They could take their standard operating procedures and replicate those on our platform, utilizing the governance model. And in so doing, they would be able to render all of the decisions and transactions into a transparent and accountable form, something that would be open to auditing. In addition, because it has a built-in reputation system, they would be able to do ROI evaluation. So yes, it's absolutely applicable in the context of real governments at both the local and national level. And so there are, if you take a look at our platform, you can get the mobile application, take a look at the nations, you will see actually a surprising list of nations that are on there. Estonia is probably one of the best known that has worked with us for a long time. There are others. I hope that answered your question. The second one is, when can I start using Bitnation to make contracts? That would be probably the earliest would be in about 3 weeks. That would be the next release, the 0.5.0. What you will get in that release will be the dApp engine, which would be our first version. It aspires to be a bit of a plug and play interaction with our API, plus some example dApps, which are, you know, in our context would be smart contracts plus some UI elements. The conversations that we're having with people now is they're basically developers. Let's say that they are, you know, some of the people would be developers who are accustomed to working with different communities, and so what they would do is develop a special application for their constituency, and so we make that really easy, and I'm really interested to learn what use case you might have on this particular case. So third question, how does Bitnation compare to other blockchain services doing the same thing? I don't know how to answer that in simple terms because I don't think there's anybody else doing the same thing the way that we are. So I guess it's almost a different conversation altogether. There are different packages out there that do one thing or another, but they don't do it in all the same way. So it's a very complex answer because the other solutions that are out there are very piecemeal. They're not holistic in this regard. So I think that's probably the best way of answering it. We are far more holistic in our solution than the other solutions that are out there. So that I think we're out of time, Jaffe.
Yeah. If that's it, I think we can call it at that and wrap up. Anything to add?
No, just looking forward to doing the next one. What you'll see in the next presentation uh, will be the beginning of the third quarter. So that's when you begin seeing the roadmap for the Lucy reputation capability, our work to introduce identity, the first ExoCortex applications, and so on.
Great. Okay, thanks everyone. Thanks Kent, and yeah, have a good day. We'll see you on the next one.
All right, cheers.